Hello, this is the video portion of the 2-hour appropriate use of force refresher course that you got to do every 2 years. We're going to follow along together. You're going to follow me in the book. You should have a paper copy or a PDF. Either way, if you got the paper copy, you can underline with a pen or highlight with a highlighter. If you have a PDF, you can use the toolbar at the top or right click and use the menu to highlight or underline your PDF. If you have any trouble with that, just pause the video, Google it, check it out on YouTube, and then come back once you know how to do it. All right, I need you to highlight those areas and underline the areas, highlight or underline the areas that I tell you to because we're going to refer back to those and they are important. All right, let's jump right into this. I am going to share my screen. Let me see. All right, here we go. All right, I'm now sharing. So this is it here, appropriate use of force. It starts with the overview. We're going to skip that, go straight to section 1, legal standards for use of force, statutes and legal considerations. We will highlight that heading, and then we're going to highlight this definition of reasonable force. Reasonable force in an arrest situation is a degree of force reasonably needed to detain an individual and to protect oneself. You're going to highlight that definition. And that comes from People v. Garcia, 1969. In the case Graham v. Connor, 1989, the United States Supreme Court held that the United States Supreme Court held that determining the objective reasonableness for the use of force must be fact specific based on and then we're going to highlight this bold text here. We're going to highlight totality of the circumstances confronting the individual at the time the force is used. It's the totality of circumstances. Highlight that whole part right there. And then it goes on, in addition to Penal Code Section 835A, the reasonableness of a particular use of force must be judged from the perspective of a, highlight the bold text, reasonable person. Highlight that. On the scene rather than with hindsight. All right, now I'm going to have my assistant read parts of this so that I don't lose my voice. Here we go.
The evaluation should be based on the facts and circumstances confronting the individual, without regard to their underlying intent or motivation. While this gram only applies to peace officers, it still provides a framework for defining reasonable force. Additionally, in People v. Curtis, 1969, 70 calories to D347, the California Supreme Court held that a person may use objectively reasonable force to defend life and limb against excessive force. When charged with a crime, a defendant is found to have legally acted in self-defense. Under Penal Code Section 197(3), if all of the following are found. Reasonably believe that they were in imminent danger of being killed or suffering bodily injury. Reasonably believe that the immediate use of force was necessary to defend against that danger, and use no more force than was reasonably necessary to defend against that danger.
All right. We're going to move on to page 41. This book that we're using is the Powers to Arrest and Appropriate Use of Force Manual. The appropriate use of force is still the same information. So we're on page 41. At the top of page 41, it's going to explain immediate or it's going to explain imminent. So we're going to highlight that whole first sentence where it says, danger is considered imminent when there is an immediate or present threat. An immediate danger cannot relate to something that may or may not happen in the future. Highlight that whole section. And then it continues.
Licensee and client contractual obligations. As security personnel, you are a representative of your employer. Therefore, any negligence or wrongful acts committed by you may also cause your client to be held responsible. Suits may be brought against you, the security agent, and/or your client. For example, a security guard makes a false arrest. The person arrested may file a civil suit for damages against the security agent, his employer, and all of those believed to be responsible, which may include the client being held liable. Even if the civil suit against you, the security personnel, or your employer fails, the action may be costly for you, your employer, and your client to defend. Security personnel who are expected to make citizens' arrests should receive explicit instructions and training on how to do so. Training should make clear the circumstances under which an arrest can be made and the procedure for making it, so as to minimize civil liability. As security personnel, you should work primarily in a preventive role. Use good judgment and exercise caution when faced with a citizen's arrest situation. Every person must be accountable for their actions. Acts of security personnel in a citizen's arrest situation are easy to defend when good judgment, restraint, and good faith have been used.
All right, continuing on, the next section, the heading is civil and criminal liability, and it starts with civil liability. You're going to highlight both of those headings, and then it's going to go straight into it.
Responsibility for the things we do or fail to do, with the possibility of being sued by. Another is called civil liability. A court judge may decide whether one party in a lawsuit has damaged another. If damages are due, the court will decide after trial how much. Money must be paid by one party to another.
All right, now it's going to go into the definition of civil liability. We're going to highlight the majority of this paragraph from where it says, civil liability is the potential non-criminal legal consequences one incurs from the commission or omission of an act. Civil liability is separate from the criminal process and cannot result in a person being arrested or sentenced to jail or prison. Civil judgment may result in a civil trial and one party being ordered by the civil court to pay money to another party for quote unquote damages. You're going to highlight that whole section. So basically, civil suits when somebody sues you or takes you to court to try to get payment for damages. That's different from criminal liability. Criminal liability is where you pay fines or you go to jail or something like that. That's a different thing. All right. And then it continues.
The process generally involves one party filing a civil suit against another party in a civil court. For example, a security guard fatally shoots a fleeing shoplifting suspect in the back. The guard, their employer, and any other person party to the shooting, such as a supervisor, may be subjected to a civil suit for the shooting and wrongful death of the deceased. This means, for example, in a civil trial, the jury may find the guard has deprived the family of the love, comfort, and financial support of the deceased. If the family members win the civil lawsuit, the guard, employer, and other parties responsible for the deadly shooting may be required to pay monetary damages to the family of the deceased. In the example given above, the guard may be subject to criminal prosecution and a prison sentence and subject to a civil lawsuit, resulting in the guard being ordered to pay money to the suspect's survivors.
All right. And then it continues to the next heading where it says, what is criminal liability? Highlight that heading. Then it starts, crimes are generally defined in penal statutes of a state or the ordinances of local cities or counties. All persons are expected to obey these laws. Anyone who violates a criminal law is subject to a fine and or term in jail or prison depending on the type of crime. So criminal lawsuit or criminal liability is where you may have to pay a fine and or spend time in jail or prison, as opposed to a civil suit where they're just seeking money for damages. Now, also, I want to make it clear. So, penal statutes are usually laws made by the lawmaking body of a state or the federal government. Ordinances are local. Those are like cities and counties and things like that. All right. Now, the next sentence in this first paragraph under what is criminal liability, we're going to highlight where it says the potential for punishment as a result of violating a criminal law is called criminal liability. That's the definition of criminal liability. You're going to highlight that whole sentence. All right, and then we're going to continue.
Some acts by security personnel for which criminal liability is possible include intimidation, threatening physical harm, or otherwise frightening people when they do, not cooperate or confess to a crime, excessive physical force, where a citizen's arrest is made, the law allows only the use of physical force that is reasonable or necessary to restrain the suspect if they are, resisting in order to make the arrest, where more force is used than that which the law allows. The arresting party is said to be using excessive force and may be held criminally, as well as civilly liable. An example of excessive force is the discharge of a firearm in shooting a suspect in order to protect personal property. By law, deadly force is allowed only to protect lives. Use of unauthorized deadly weapons, becoming registered as a security guard does not entitle a security guard to carry a weapon. Some weapons cannot be carried by security guards, including knives with blades longer than 2 inches or switchblade knives, brass knuckles, nunchakus, or sawed-off shotguns. Security guards cannot carry a firearm and or a button unless they have the additional exposed firearm permit nor a hot certificate. If they carry the firearm concealed, they must also have a concealed weapons permit issued by their local law enforcement agency.
All right, so you can't carry a firearm or baton unless you specifically have the BSIS permit for carrying those. And if you're carrying concealed, you also have to have the CCW. All right, continuing.
Proprietary private security officers are unarmed and cannot carry a firearm, baton, or any deadly weapon by law. Unlawful use of defensive weapons. Security guards cannot carry firearms and batons unless authorized by the Bureau. Security guards are allowed to carry an exposed firearm and or baton only after the security guard completes the Bureau recognized training and the appropriate permits are issued. False arrest. Misdemeanor arrest. A private person making a misdemeanor citizen's arrest may be found criminally liable for a false arrest if the arrest is made and the arresting party did not actually observe the suspect commit the misdemeanor in their presence.
All right, and then it continues with felony arrest.
Felony arrest. A private person making a felony citizen's arrest may be found criminally and civilly liable for a false arrest if the arrest is made or caused to be made by others and the arresting party does not have reasonable cause to believe that the person arrested committed the felony.
All right, and then it's going to go into criminal liability. Wait, where are we? Hang on. Okay, so we did civil liability, and now we're going into criminal liability. We're going to highlight the whole first section of this paragraph. Criminal liability is the potential for a criminal penalty one incurs for committing a criminal act. This liability may include an arrest and booking, a court trial, a conviction, and sentencing. The sentence may include payment of a fine, a prison sentence, probation or community service, and monetary restitution. An entry is also made on the subject's criminal history record maintained by the Department of Justice. You're going to highlight that whole thing. So that's very different than civil liability. Civil liability, you're paying for damages. Criminal liability, there's courts and prisons and you can still have to pay money and probation and all that. All right. And then it continues on.
The parties in a criminal process include the defendant, the accused, and the prosecution, the people of the state of California. For example, a security guard fatally shoots a fleeing shoplifting suspect in the back. The guard may be subject to criminal prosecution for the shooting. The guard may be charged with a crime such as manslaughter, arrested, booked, and prosecuted in a criminal court, convicted, and sentenced to prison. Civil and or criminal liability. For example, a security guard has an interaction with a local activist and the activist films the interaction and attempts to antagonize the security guard by becoming confrontational. This is a common technique used by First Amendment auditors. There has been a recent uptick in self-proclaimed First Amendment auditors in an attempt to win social media views. The auditors deliberately provoke guards on camera in an effort to get them to respond in a way that appears to violate the law. These auditors can be aggressive and may try to provoke a physical confrontation It is important to remain calm in these situations, as reacting angrily or physically may open up the guard and you are there. Employer to public embarrassment, civil and/or criminal penalties.
All right. Okay, hang on for 1 second. I'm gonna stop sharing here. And then I'm gonna adjust. All right, now we're back at it. We are on page 45. We're gonna highlight the heading objectively reasonable standard. Highlight that heading. Then it says the goal for the use of force by licensed security agents is to gain and maintain control of an individual and the situation. Then we're going to highlight the next little heading over these bullet points. It says security personnel are required to, and we're going to highlight the first bullet point, use the type of force objectively reasonable under the totality of the circumstances. That's important. Security personnel are required to use the type of force objectively reasonable under the totality of the circumstances. That means everything considered. All right, and then it continues.
Use only the amount of force objectively reasonable to overcome resistance and to gain or maintain control of the subject. Conform to agency policy, federal and state law. Individuals must rely upon their own judgment to ensure that the amount of force used to gain and/or maintain control of the subject or situation does not exceed what is objectively reasonable under the totality of the circumstances confronting them. Whenever possible, security personnel should attempt to generate voluntary compliance without resorting to physical force. Objective reasonableness. When balanced against the type and amount of force used, the Graham factors used to determine whether an individual's use of force is objectively reasonable are whether the suspect posed an immediate threat to the safety of the public. The severity of the crime at issue. Whether the suspect was actively resisting detention or citizen's arrest. Whether the suspect was attempting to evade arrest by flight. And split-second judgments during circumstances that are tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving. Of these factors, the most important is whether the individual poses an immediate threat to the individual or to the public.
All right, then we're going to continue down. The next sentence says the reasonableness inquiry is not limited to the consideration of those factors alone. Then there's another sentence and a list of bullet points. We're going to highlight that next sentence where it says other factors which may determine reasonableness in a use of force incident include, first bullet point, still highlight, whether there was an opportunity to warn about the use of force prior to force being used, and if so, was such a warning given? Highlight that. And then it continues with the bullet points.
Whether there was any assessment by security personnel of the subject's ability to cease resistance and/or comply with the guard's commands, availability of other reasonable force options, a number of guard subjects, age, size, and relative strength of guard subjects, specialized knowledge, skills, or abilities of subjects, prior contacts, injury or exhaustion of security personnel, access to potential weapons.
All right, and it continues with a few more bullet points. Here we go.
Environmental factors, including but not limited to lighting, footing, sound, conditions, crowds, traffic, and other hazards. Whether security personnel have reason to believe that the subject is mentally ill, emotionally disturbed, or under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Examples of situations where force may be necessary. Which force options would be considered a reasonable response. For example, a shoplifting subject verbally and physically assaults a security officer. With an open hand, it is reasonable to protect yourself with less lethal weapons and place the subject in custody by using handcuffs. What options would be considered unreasonable? It would be unreasonable to utilize alternative items in the store that may be considered a deadly weapon, such as a fire extinguisher, to halt the individual's actions. Oh, how does situational awareness play into this real-time decision making? Oh, situational awareness plays a key tool into real-time decision making. If the officer is unaware of the situation and cannot consistently adapt to a changing and often chaotic environment, they will have a difficult time prevailing in this situation.
All right, and then it continues.
Restraint techniques and their implications. The primary objective of the application of control holds and takedowns is to gain control of a subject. Security personnel must be prepared to use physical force to overcome resistance and gain control of a subject. Once control is obtained, the degree of force used should be reevaluated. Under no circumstances should security personnel apply pressure of any sorts to the subject's neck, placing any significant pressure or weight, such as placing a knee, elbow, or any body part on a subject's neck, can result in serious injury or death to the subject and exposes the security personnel to potential legal consequences. It is illegal and immoral for security personnel to use their authority and position to punish anyone. Also, anytime force is used, the security personnel open themselves and their employer to substantial liability. A control hold is a method for physically controlling a subject by manually applying pressure to a particular part of the body until the security personnel has control over them. Subject. A joint lock is a specific class of a control hold where the technique involves the manipulation of subjects' joints in such a way that they reach their maximal degree of motion.
All right. Next page.
The proper use of a control hold can help security personnel who effectively control a subject. Oh, guide a subject in a desired direction. Oh, control a subject when searching for weapons only. Oh, control a subject while handcuffing. Oh, prevent escape. Security personnel should be aware of the following when a control hold is used on a subject.
And it's got consideration, direction, and control. And the explanation is if a subject resists or does not respond to the control hold, communicate effectively by telling the subject what you want them to do and at the same time applying the proper level of force to gain compliance. Once compliance is achieved, the controlling force should be reevaluated. The force used must be reasonable. Then the next consideration, close proximity of the security guard and the subject. Explanation is security personnel are within striking distance of the subject during the use of a control hold, and the guard's weapon, if any, may be accessible to the subject. An individual may be able to respond faster through touch than by sight. And it continues.
A takedown technique is a method for taking the subject to the ground in order to control the subject and the situation. The proper use of a takedown technique may help security personnel diffuse a situation, achieve greater control over a subject, distract a subject, control a situation, reduce the ability of the subject to effectively attack, strike, or escape. Security personnel should be aware of these considerations when a takedown technique is used.
Then it has another box here or matrix or what have you, and it says consideration, close proximity of the security guard and the subject. Explanation, guards are within striking distance of the subject during a takedown technique and are vulnerable to attack. The next consideration is team takedown. And that explanation is when possible, security personnel should control the arms to prevent the subject from tucking their arms. Communication is important for coordinating control amongst guards. Oh, and then it goes, the next consideration is a single technique may not be adequate to gain complete control of a subject. And the explanation of that is security personnel must be prepared to transition to another technique if the one currently being used is not working. And it continues.
Restraint devices such as handcuffs are safety devices for both the security guard and the detainee. Handcuffs inhibit and limit movement, but they do not provide total control. Security personnel are responsible for their detainees at all times while in custody. All restraint devices are temporary restraining devices used to limit a detainee's actions. They do not totally immobilize a subject. Restraint devices are used to minimize attack on security personnel or others. Escape of the detainee. O. Destruction or concealment of evidence or contraband. O. Self-inflicted injury by subject. O. Combat between detainees. Employer policies may vary regarding the use of different restraint devices. Security. Personnel should be familiar with their own employer's policies regarding limitations and procedures for using restraining devices. Force options. Force options are choices available to security personnel in any given situation to overcome resistance, effect a citizen's arrest, prevent escape, gain control of the situation, and in the defense of self and others. Individuals must rely upon their own judgment to ensure the amount of force used to gain and/or maintain control of a subject or situation does not exceed what is objectively reasonable under the totality of the circumstances confronting them.
Remember that the totality of the circumstances confronting them. We've already highlighted that, but you can highlight that again if you want. All right, then it says the various force options are placed into three general categories. Force option, non-deadly force, foreseeable injury, force which creates a minimum risk of injury. Intermediate force, force which has a significant risk of injury. And deadly force, force which has a substantial risk of serious bodily injury / death or death. All right, continues.
The following list includes tools and techniques which are the most common force options available to security personnel, but it is not all inclusive. Security personnel should recognize that the risk of injury created by a particular force option may vary depending upon how the force option is applied. O. Professional command presence. O. Interpersonal communication techniques warnings. O. Control holds, takedowns, handcuffing.
All right, and then it continues. Next page, page 49. There's some more bullet points. Chemical agents, tear gas, pepper spray, impact weapons, batons, tasers, impact projectile weapons, tasers, firearms. And then it continues.
Note, security personnel need not apply force options and techniques chronologically. Individuals should select the force option most objectively reasonable, given the totality of the circumstances once the decision to use force has been made. There are a number of factors that can affect which force option security personnel should select. The following chart identifies, but is not limited to, some of the most critical factors.
All right, and then it has this chart here. It says factor public and personal safety considerations, immediate action required for self-defense or defense of others. Factor amount of and nature of the resistance which must be overcome or flight of attempted flight. Considerations passive non-compliance, active resistance, assaultive resistance, life-threatening resistance. Factor presence of a weapon and type of weapon. Considerations other weapons, firearms. Factor seriousness and nature of the offense, misdemeanor, considerations misdemeanor, trespassing, robbery. Characteristics of the subject as compared to the characteristics of the guard, and the considerations are size, age, knowledge of capabilities. Factor availability of assistance, considerations number of security personnel, available law enforcement, distance of responding law enforcement. Factor nature and condition of the location and surroundings, considerations danger to bystanders, availability of weapons, environmental considerations. So these are just factors that exist in your situation and the considerations you need to think about. All right, and then we go to key considerations.
Key considerations. Practical considerations are a key factor in a security agent's choice of force options. Some of the factors to consider are: O. Distance. Would a force option be effective at the distance involved? O. Number of subjects. Can the force option effectively be used to engage multiple subjects or only a single subject? O. Subject's mental state or state of intoxication. Which force options would be effective regarding a subject's apparent mental illness or state of intoxication, possibly resulting in increased pain tolerance, accelerated strength, or inability to communicate with the subject?
All right, and it continues.
Subject's physical strength and skill. Does security personnel have the physical strength and skill to effectively use a force option compared to the subject's apparent physical strength and skill? Oh, affecting or endangering other people. What potential effect does a force option have on other security personnel or bystanders at the scene? Oh, time. Does the guard have time to effectively use a force option? Security personnel should recognize making transitions between force options can be difficult during stressful and rapidly changing conditions. It is useful for security personnel to practice making such transitions during training. Be prepared to transition to another force option if the one being used appears to be ineffective in controlling the subject or situation.
All right. And then we go on to real life scenarios, including potential consequences.
Real life scenarios, including potential consequences. The use of deadly force is the most serious decision an individual may ever have to make. Deadly force applied by security personnel is force that creates a substantial risk of causing death or serious bodily injury. The decision to use deadly force to defend against an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury to the individual or to another person is guided by federal case law and California state law. Serious bodily harm or injury means a serious impairment of physical condition, including, but not limited to, the following: loss of consciousness, concussion, bone fracture, protracted loss or impairment of function of any bodily member or organ, a wound, requiring extensive suturing and serious disfigurement. Penal Code Section 243 F4, effective January 1st, 2016. Reasonable necessity means that delay in apprehension would create substantial and unreasonable risk to the individual or others, possibly resulting in serious physical injury or death.
All right. Now we're going to go to the next paragraph that starts with the definition of imminent. We're going to highlight this whole section describing imminent. It says imminent. A threat of death or serious injury is imminent when, based on the totality of the circumstances, a reasonable individual in the same situation would believe that a person has the present ability, opportunity, and apparent intent to immediately cause death or serious bodily injury to the security guard or another person. You're going to highlight that whole thing, and you're also going to underline immediately. So, has the present ability, opportunity, and apparent intent to immediately cause death or serious bodily injury to the security guard or another person. And it continues.
Imminent harm is not merely a fear of future harm, no matter how great the fear and no matter how great the likelihood of the harm, but is one that, from appearances, must be instantly confronted and addressed. Penal Code Section 835 AE to effective January 1st, 2020. According to the law, fear alone does not justify the use of deadly force. The courts have held that, a simple statement of fear for your safety is not enough. There must be objective factors to justify your concern. It must be objectively reasonable. It must be based on the facts and circumstances known to the officer at the time. Security personnel shall not use deadly force against a person based on the danger that person poses to themselves if an objectively reasonable individual would believe the person does not pose an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury to the security guard or to another person.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I'm going to skip forward a little bit. And I'm going to reshare. All right, and we're back on page 52, section 3, duty to intercede. I'll highlight that whole thing, section 3, duty to intercede, or just highlight duty to intercede. And then in the margin, I want you to write a note with your pen or whatever, or you can do that with the toolbar on your PDF, and put in the margin, it says duty to intercede equals intervene on behalf of another. So that's what intercede means. It means to intervene on behalf of another. And then we're going to highlight the first sentence of this section where it says, as security personnel are not sworn peace officers, they do not have an obligation to intercede and cannot be held liable for a failure to intercede. You're going to highlight that whole sentence. And it's going to continue.
Remember, if you can't prevent an incident, the proper action should be to observe and report. You should. Oh, observe carefully and report immediately to local law enforcement or your supervisor. Actions based on poor judgment can lead to legal problems for both you and your employer. You must, by law, avoid certain actions, legal responsibilities, and liabilities that affect you are presented in this section. Legal considerations. Security guards do not have the same job duties as peace officers, the same training, or the same powers as peace officers, according to the law. The security guard's duty to intercede is going to be dictated by the contract for services. These duties can range from simply being present to removing trespassers or reacting to crimes and maintaining law and order. Knowing all the responsibilities of the post end, understanding what is expected of the security guard will ensure security personnel are acting within the limitations of their position.
All right, and it continues.
Security personnel have the authority to enforce company rules, protect persons and property, remove trespassers, and fulfill whatever duties they are contractually obligated to provide. Security personnel must be educated and aware of any contractual obligations they may have regarding their duty to intercede and/or use of physical contact to remove and/or apprehend a subject. Security personnel must be educated and aware that if they go beyond what is allowable by law and/or outside of the scope of the contract they are serving under, they may be held criminally and/or civilly liable.
All right, page. Oh, I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to skip ahead here a bit. And we're going to restart on page 54. And I'll share again. Here we go. All right, section 4, supervisory responsibilities. Go ahead and highlight the heading where it says incident reporting requirements. You can highlight that. I'll have my assistant read the first paragraph.
While practices vary among employers, at the very least, security personnel must report to their supervisor any incident that results in physical contact, regardless of whether a weapon was involved or whether an injury resulted from the altercation.
All right, so you always report to your supervisor any kind of altercation between yourself and someone else. Then it goes on to say under this section of the Business and Professions Code, and you're going to highlight that first part there where it says the Bureau, meaning BSIS, requires a written report to be delivered to the Bureau within 7 days of a physical altercation. You can highlight that whole part and you underline 7 days. All right, and then it continues.
Failure to do so may result in the suspension or revocation of a license and a fine, up to $5,000. Communication with your employer is crucial to ensure that all relevant incidents are reported in a timely manner. Business and Professions Code, Division 3, Chapter 11.5, Private Security Services, 7583.2. A person licensed as a private patrol operator shall not do any of the following. F. Fail to deliver to the director a written report describing the circumstances surrounding the discharge of any firearm or physical altercation with a member of the public while on duty by a licensee or any officer, partner, or employee of a licensee while acting within the course and scope of their employment within 7 business days after the qualifying incident. For the purposes of the subdivision, a report shall be required only for physical altercations that result in any of the following: 1. The arrest of a security guard. 2. The filing of a police report by a member of the public. 3. A member of the public requiring any type of first aid or other medical attention. 4. The discharge, suspension, or reprimand of a security guard by their employer. Or 5. Any physical use of force or violence on any person while on duty. The report shall include, but not be limited to, a description of any Injuries are damages incurred, the identity of all participants, and whether police. Investigation was conducted. Any report may be investigated by the director to determine if any disciplinary action is necessary.
All right, I'll stop sharing again. And then I'll skip forward here. And we will reconvene on page 56. All right, section 5, use of force review and analysis. Here we go.
The immediate threat to the safety of security personnel or others is the most significant factor in determining reasonableness. The subject's actions and the practical considerations involved in a situation are major factors in determining the type of force the guard may lawfully use in order to gain or maintain control of the subject or the situation. The following chart illustrates how a subject's resistance actions can correlate to the force applied by a guard.
Okay, now this whole chart here, just highlight the whole thing. For some reason, my PDF won't let me highlight this part. Highlight the whole thing. So it goes subject actions, compliant, description, subject offers no resistance, possible force option, mere professional appearance, nonverbal actions, verbal requests and commands, handcuffing, and control holds. Then passive non-compliant does not respond to verbal commands, but also offers no physical form of resistance. And possible force options, security personnel's strength to take physical control, including lifting and / carrying, proper level of force using control holds, takedowns, and techniques to direct movement or immobilize a subject. You got subject actions, actively resistant. Description, physically evasive movements to defeat a guard's attempts at control, including bracing, tensing, running away, or verbally or physically signaling an intention to avoid or prevent being taken into or retained in custody. Possible force option, control holds and techniques to control the subject and situation. Use of personal body weapons to gain an advantage over the subject. That would be less lethal, obviously, non-lethal. Assaultive, aggressive or combative, attempting to assault security personnel or another person verbally or physically displays an intention to assault security personnel or another person. Force options, use of devices and or techniques to secure compliance and ultimately gain control of the situation, use of personal body weapons in self-defense and to gain an advantage over the subject. All right, life-threatening. Any action likely to result in serious bodily injury or death of others. Possible force options, utilizing firearms and or any other available weapon or action in. And then it ends there. Notice the firearm is not even mentioned in any of the other ones. It's only mentioned on this last one. All right. Oh, here we go. So utilizing firearms or any other available weapon or action in, and it continues on the next page, defense of self and others to stop the threat. That's under life-threatening. You should understand that whole chart there. All right. And then it continues.
Individuals must consider the totality of the circumstances when selecting a force option. It is not the intent of this chart to imply that security persons' force options are limited based on any single factor. Security personnel must use the force options appropriate for the situation as conditions may change rapidly. Individuals must continually reevaluate the subject's actions and the practical considerations involved in the situation and must be prepared to transition as needed to the appropriate force options, de-escalate or escalate so as to always remain within the bounds of conduct which is objectively reasonable under the circumstances.
All right, now we're going to go into key considerations. Let's highlight key considerations here. And then it says practical considerations are a key factor in the security agent's choice of force options. Some of the factors to consider. Now, there's a bunch of bullet points here. We're going to highlight the bold first portion of every bullet point where it says distance. These are the things you're going to consider. Number of subjects, subject's mental state or state of intoxication, subject's physical strength and skill, affecting or endangering other people, and time. So just highlight those main points there. All right, here we go.
O distance. Would a force option be effective at the distance involved? O number of subjects. Can the force option effectively be used to engage multiple? Subjects are only a single subject. O subject's mental state or state of intoxication. Which force options would be effective regarding a subject's apparent mental illness or state of intoxication, possibly resulting in increased pain tolerance, accelerated strength, or inability to communicate with the subject? O subject's physical strength and skill. Does security personnel have the physical strength and skill to effectively use a force option compared to the subjects? Apparent physical strength and skill. O affecting or endangering other people. What potential effect does a force option have on other security personnel or bystanders at the scene? O time. Does the guard have time to effectively use a force option? Security personnel should recognize that making transitions between force options can be difficult during stressful and rapidly changing conditions. It is useful for security personnel to practice making such transitions during training. Be prepared to transition to another force option if the one being used appears to be ineffective in controlling the subject or situation.
All right, then after that, we're going to highlight the whole next part. There's a sentence and 3 bullet points. We're highlighting all of it, where it says private security professionals may use the force reasonably believed to be necessary to defend themselves or another person, protect their employer's property, or make a citizen's arrest or prevent an escape after making a citizen's arrest. I'm going to highlight those.
Reasonable force is that degree of force that is, not excessive, and appropriate in protecting oneself or one's property. If a suspect submits willingly, no force is necessary. If a suspect does resist arrest,
All right, continues on the next page.
remember that the only force allowed is that which is reasonable and necessary to overcome the resistance. Real life scenarios. Example, you receive a call to respond to a closed business regarding a suspicious subject seen loitering behind the business. Upon arrival, you see a male subject pacing back and forth by the rear of the building. When you approach the subject, he is mumbling incoherently and does not respond to your questions. As you try and engage the subject, he suddenly starts shouting and pushes you away. It is obvious that the subject is either having a mental health issue or is on drugs or alcohol. You maintain a safe distance and request assistance from law enforcement. Example, while engaging a trespasser on your client's property, the subject pulls an object out of their pocket that looks like it could be a knife or a tool of some sort. You are approximately 20 feet away and can identify the object. What force option would seem appropriate at this stage? What force option is appropriate if the subject begins to move in your general direction?
All right, and then it continues on the next page. All right, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Skip ahead. We'll come back on page 60. I'll reshare. Here we go. Let's see. All right, section 6, de-escalation and interpersonal communication training. Common misconceptions and benefits of de-escalation. Here we go.
Security personnel must understand how the principles of de-escalation can enhance contacts with the public and result in improved decision-making, reduction in situational intensity, and opportunities for outcomes with greater voluntary compliance. De-escalation is the process of using strategies and techniques intended to decrease the intensity of the situation. Common misconceptions of de-escalation include, but are not limited to, well, if security personnel use force, that means they fail to de-escalate. Security personnel are losing control at scenes. Security personnel are letting their guard down. De-escalation is too difficult to apply in rapidly changing situations. Benefits of the practice of de-escalation include, but are not limited to, Oh, positive impact on public trust and professional image. Oh, reduced danger to security personnel and the public. Oh, positive impact on individual wellness.
All right. Continues. Four concepts of de-escalation.
Four concepts of de-escalation. Security personnel should attempt to recognize the public's physical and psychological reactions to situations, as well as their own physical and psychological reactions to situations. Tactics and techniques may assist in decreasing the situational intensity of a situation and gain voluntary compliance.
All right, now it says one, self-control. Highlight that. One, self-control. Understanding of physical and physiological reactions of the public and security personnel may assist in maintaining self-control. And then you're going to highlight number two, effective communication. Clear commands and questions, good observation and listening skills, and appropriate terminology will enhance the likelihood of success. Highlight that. And it continues.
Interpersonal communication training. Effective communication is a basic element of the use of force. A major goal of communication is to gain voluntary compliance without resorting to physical force. The use of de-escalation communication can aid in diffusing a potentially volatile incident and avoid the need to use force against an individual. When feasible, security personnel should approach a situation with the intent to de-escalate and consider the value of establishing time and distance in a confrontation where a use of force may be inherent. Strategic communication is the use of verbal and non-verbal techniques to aid in controlling a situation and enhancing personal and community safety. Security personnel should communicate and endeavor to persuade, advise, and provide
It continues.
clear instructions and warnings when safe and feasible to do so. Consider the use of non-verbal methods to communicate when verbal directions may not be appropriate. This may include situations involving language barriers or when people are unable to hear or understand verbal commands. Some of the benefits of strategic communication may be, but are not limited to O, de-escalation. O, maintaining personal and community safety. O, gaining voluntary compliance. O, building rapport. O, decreasing citizen complaints.
All right. And then it goes on. It says, remember, there are two ways to communicate a message. Professional, be flexible enough to look beyond your perspective and be empathetic. Always use your language as if you had an audience. And unprofessional, the unprofessional use of language designed to escalate the situation, not knowing your audience, antagonistic or sarcastic reactions. All right. And then it continues.
Security personnel may need to deal with persons who are angry or upset or verbally lash out. Instead of responding in kind, individuals should deflect or redirect the conversation in a more positive direction. This can be done with the use of verbal deflectors. The key to using verbal deflectors is to deflect the comment, then to immediately add but or however. Some examples of verbal deflectors are, oh, appreciate that, but, oh, I understand that, but, oh, I got that, however, oh, maybe so, but, oh, I hear that, however. Verbal deflectors allow security personnel to focus on the issue and not the attitude. The phrase also acknowledges the other person's concerns.
All right, now we're going to continue this list that started earlier. Under four concepts of de-escalation, there's self-control, there's effective communication. This whole last bit was effective communication, and that was number two. Now we're on number three, and we're going to highlight number three, scene assessment and management. You're going to highlight that. When possible, provides security personnel with an accurate picture of what is occurring and assists in the management of force options. You're also going to highlight number four where it says force options. Highlight that. Force options, reasonable use of force techniques may reduce the situational intensity for the safety of all parties. And then it continues.
Voluntary compliance requires clearly communicated instructions using de-escalation techniques. There can be many public safety issues when attempting to use de-escalation techniques. Remember the importance of voice, neutrality, trustworthiness, and respect.
All right. Next page, page 62, real life scenarios. It continues.
Real life scenarios. Although rapidly evolving and/or violent incidents may not allow individuals to slow things down, using the time when safe and practical to do so may aid in reducing the intensity of the situation. Although there are situations where guards cannot delay in acting, many can be handled safely and effectively by allowing more time to transpire. These strategies and techniques to de-escalate a situation may affect security guard, safety, situational awareness, and tactical repositioning. Creating distance may calm an irate individual and help reduce the person's intensity. But if doing so poses a loss of situational control or personal or public safety are further jeopardized, then adding distance may be counterproductive to achieving a positive outcome. Situational awareness is a critical consideration in de escalation, recognizing what may be an immediate threat, seeing people or items causing agitation to a violent suspect, or understanding how some stimuli are altering behavior can aid security personnel in responding well to an incident. Tactical repositioning is often utilized for security personnel safety, and it can also be considered as a de escalation technique. An employee being less or more visible can affect the actions of others. The vantage points from which security personnel observe must provide for personal safety. Different positions may also direct someone's attention elsewhere, draw them away from threats, and/or help de-escalate a situation.
All right, and it goes on.
Gaining useful information prior to arriving at an incident and continuing to update it during the interaction may assist security personnel with a better understanding, while possibly providing additional solutions not recognized without the information. 4. Example. Oh, knowing a despondent person's child recently died would be helpful to an individual trying to assist them. Oh, information on past security or law enforcement contacts with the individual. Oh, gathering information on medications or medical issues of the individual. Oh, contacting a family member. Oh, assess whether the action has the desired effect. Oh, if the action has the desired effect, is there anything more that can be done? Oh, review what lessons can be learned following the conclusion of contacting family members for additional information on the individual. When documenting incidents where de escalation techniques are utilized, security personnel should include specific words spoken and suspect actions taken and not taken. The documentation should provide a clear understanding of what the security guard was facing, the actions taken, the observations made, and other important facts related to the actions of all individuals on the scene.
All right. I'm just going to say one more point on this. At one point, I was working at a site and they had somebody show up in the morning who was obviously intoxicated and they thought he was drunk and they were trying to send him home. And I'm only bringing this up because I want to encourage you to get medical training. I got trained as an EMT, and in that training, I learned that diabetics, if they're having a diabetic emergency, they will behave like they're drunk, and their breath will even smell like sweet liquor. It'll smell as if they've been drinking. And because I knew that, I found a friend at this location who knew the guy, the employee, and they confirmed that he was diabetic. And instead of sending this guy away for showing up to work drunk, they called an ambulance and he was taken care of. So that just goes along. One, I want to point out to you that it's very, very helpful to get medical training. It will also help your career and it will open up the job opportunities you have if you have that training. But also, this goes along with gaining useful information. All right, next page, 63.
Using communication verbal deflection to de escalate. Example, a security guard is working on the premises of a local homeowners association. HOA, when an individual at the main gate is demanding to be let into the community but does not have the proper access information. The individual attempts to reason with the security officer, claiming, I know you recognize me. My dad lives in Unit 30. The security officer declines and the individual grows agitated. The officer deflects the individual's remarks and avoids escalation by explaining to the individual that guests are not permitted without the proper access information, and that as the security officer, there is a responsibility to enforce the rules, and unfortunately, that means not allowing access. Without the proper access information, using distance tactical repositioning time to de escalate. Example, while patrolling a busy parking lot, a security guard encounters an impaired individual who appears to be suffering from a mental health crisis. Before the guard can make contact with the individual, the subject sees the guard and begins screaming and wielding a large stick. The guard retreats to a safe distance, placing themselves between the subject and the patrons who are walking through the parking lot. The guard maintains a visual on the subject from a safe distance and calls police.
All right. I'm going to stop sharing again for a second. I'm going to skip ahead here. And we're going to go to page 65, which I will share with you now. And it continues here on section 7, implicit and explicit bias and cultural competency.
Cultural competency is a continuous learning process that includes addressing and understanding implicit and explicit bias. Cultural competency is a set of demonstrable characteristics and skills that enable and improve security persons' ability to understand, communicate, and effectively interact with people across cultures, in addition to improving job efficiency and performance. Cultural competence improves interactions with people of various cultures and can enhance community trust, improve safety, and reduce confrontation. Security personnel need to recognize and respect the complexities of cultural diversity to develop the skills necessary for identifying and responding to California's changing communities.
All right, then it's going to go into definitions here of implicit bias and explicit bias. You need to know the difference. So implicit bias is unconscious thoughts and feelings. You want to highlight that. Implicit bias, unconscious thoughts and feelings about people that may influence actions. You're also going to highlight the definition of explicit bias, conscious thoughts and feelings. Highlight that influence perceptions, decisions, and actions. And then it goes on to explain cultural competency. Here we go.
An awareness of cultural differences and the ability to provide security services in a manner that acknowledges such differences. The ability to understand, appreciate, and interact with persons from cultures and/or belief systems other than one's own. An ability to recover from inevitable cultural collisions, inclusive decision-making. Cross-cultural communication skills, inclusive beliefs and values. Awareness of personal biases and stereotypes, and emotional intelligence.
All right, and then it continues.
The components of bias include stereotypes, cognitive, prejudice, affective, discrimination, behavioral. Implicit bias is a preference, positive or negative, for a social category that operates outside of awareness. We can think of implicit bias as a lens through which we view the world. Implicit biases are common. People are often unaware of their implicit biases. Implicit biases predict behavior. People differ in levels of implicit bias. Personal awareness and introspection are prime strategies towards reducing implicit bias in decision making.
All right, and then it continues.
Perceptions and stereotypes. Individuals are not born with set opinions or perceptions. Instead, they develop these based on many different sources and influences throughout their lifetimes. Recognizing these sources and influences can help an individual differentiate between rational and irrational opinions or perceptions of individuals with differing cultural backgrounds. All individuals develop perceptions, feelings, biases, and thoughts regarding their culture and the culture of others. These perceptions are neither right nor wrong, a common belief. One's perception is one's reality. A stereotype is a preconceived or oversimplified generalization involving negative or positive beliefs about another group. When an individual is stereotyped, that person is perceived as having specific behavioral traits and abilities.
All right, and then it goes into stereotypes we're going to highlight this sentence and all the bullet points that follow, where it says stereotypes can be based on a number of factors, including but not limited to nationality, ethnicity, race, gender, sexual orientation, and gender identity, socioeconomic status, age, physical ability. Highlight that whole thing. And then it continues.
Stereotyping can mean not only ascribing differences to other groups, but can also result in making a judgment, positive or negative, based on those perceived differences. Security personnel must be aware of their own biases and stereotypes regarding the communities and individuals they serve. Relying on biases can potentially lead to developing a lower level of tolerance to individual behavior, forming conclusions before getting to a scene, decreasing an individual's objectivity concerning the facts of a case, potential development of unsafe situations, escalation of non-hostile situations, negative expectations becoming self-fulfilling prophecies, inappropriate security personnel behavior, prejudice and discrimination, any preconceived notions, whether positive or negative, about a cultural or ethnic group, formed before the facts are known, can lead to acts of discrimination. Prejudice is a prejudgment or point of view about a person or group of individuals, that is, usually formed before the facts are known. Prejudice is a process, not a static attitude, a learned attitude.
All right, and it continues on the next page.
A way of thinking about others that may be based on misconceptions, misunderstandings, inflexible generalizations. One of the deepest and therefore most dangerous forms of prejudice is subconscious prejudice. Individuals may have been conditioned by such beliefs to the point that their prejudice causes them to act out in a hostile and potentially dangerous way. Discrimination is an action or behavior that is prompted or based on prejudiced thought. It includes differential treatment based on an unsubstantiated or unfair categorization. Because a prejudice is a thought, it is private and is not a violation of the law. A prejudicial thought that is acted upon, consciously or unconsciously, may lead to discrimination. Behaviors or acts of discrimination can be unlawful. Strategies for effective communication within a diverse community. Security personnel must demonstrate active listening and excellent decision-making skills. It is each individual's responsibility to treat everyone with respect and integrity, no matter what their race, creed, or religion. It is not enough to accept differences, we must understand differences are to be valued and celebrated for the rich contributions they provide to our society.
All right, and it continues.
Culture is a broadly used term that refers to a complex group of shared characteristics, including beliefs, values, ways of thinking, behaviors, customs, or traditions. Culture is learned and can be passed from one generation to the next. Culture can be interpreted broadly, encompassing large groups of people from specific geographic or regional areas. The Californians, New Yorkers, Midwesterners, etc., are national origins, Mexicans, Germans, Japanese, Italians, etc. Note, even though a person identifies with a cultural or ethnic group, no one person represents the views or behaviors of an entire group. This is because everyone is a member of many groups based on many different factors, e.g. gender, religion, occupation, sexual orientation, and gender identity, etc. Identifying with a cultural or ethnic group can elicit strong feelings of pride, shared beliefs, values, or history. It can provide individuals with roots that help maintain a personal identity within a diverse or quickly changing community or environment.
All right, now in the next paragraph where it says, we're going to highlight this whole next paragraph where it defines cultural diversity. We're going to highlight cultural diversity is defined as the existence of variations of different characteristics in a group of people, including race, color, ethnicity, age, disability, gender identity or expression, nationality, religion, socioeconomic status, and sexual orientation. Highlight or underline that whole section. All right, and it continues.
Varying dimensions of diversity exist among members of the same cultural group. These variations can include, but are not limited to, generational differences. i.e., first, second, third generation, or economic differences,
Next page.
differing levels of education, of varying religious beliefs, work experience and backgrounds, age differences, physical or developmental disabilities of members within the community. In addition, a primary goal of security personnel in their duty to observe and report is to obtain complete and accurate information in a safe manner, security personnel conduct, and actions when first making contact with an individual with a different cultural background can serve to either enhance or hinder this process. Developing appropriate contact and communication skills can improve the quality of the information gathered from the individual, enhance cooperation of the individual and other members of the community, increase security personnel confidence and professionalism, demonstrate a caring attitude, enhance safety.
All right, then the next heading, it says inappropriate verbal communication. Highlight that. And it goes on.
Certain forms of communication can contribute to a negative response from a cross-cultural community and must be avoided. The following table identifies a number of these.
All right, so it's got use of profanity, and then under by security personnel can, so use of profanity by security personnel can have a negative effect on the professional image of the guard. And then the next bullet point in this chart here, we're going to highlight where it says use of derogatory or offensive terminology by security personnel can detract from personal effectiveness, make individuals reluctant to cooperate, demonstrate a lack of cultural, racial, and ethnic awareness, indicate a lack of sensitivity for the feelings of others. We're also going to highlight the third bullet point where it says use of legal or technical jargon. That's like a specialized technical language. By security personnel can cause confusion and mistrust, be demeaning to the individual. You're going to highlight the second and third bullet points in that chart. Basically, you just want to be respectful in your use of language. Be respectful, be polite, and be professional. And it continues.
When attempting to communicate with an individual who speaks little English or for whom English is a second language, security personnel should be patient. Speak slowly and clearly. Speak at a normal volume. Speaking louder will not help comprehension. Face the person they are addressing, even when using a translator. Use short, simple sentences. Pause frequently. Allow enough time for the person to formulate responses. Repeat statements or questions in different ways if necessary. Use gestures, actions, or written text to aid understanding. Provide feedback and encouragement. Summarize what the individual is saying to check comprehension.
All right, next page. So the next page, page 69, we're going to highlight this first heading, active listening. Highlight the heading. It continues.
Communication involves not only speaking, but also listening. In times of stress and when interacting with an individual with limited skills in the English language, taking the time, an effort to actively listen is even more critical.
All right, then we're going to highlight the next section where it says active listening involves deliberate and conscious concentration on the part of the listener on what is being said, how it is being said, and why it is being said. Highlight active listening. All right, and then it continues.
Note, active listening on the part of security personnel also aids in ensuring safety, as it requires them to become more aware of the individual with whom they are interacting. The following table identifies the 4 primary steps of active listening.
All right, step 1, remain open-minded, unbiased, and ethical. Step 2, listen carefully to the context of the message and ask the individual to slow down or repeat the message if necessary. Step 3, interpret the message by considering how and why it was said, and the meaning may not be only in the words that were said, but in the nonverbal communication. And step 4, act appropriately. It continues.
Nonverbal communication. In a situation involving cross-cultural communication, nonverbal communication can constitute an even greater role than it does with individuals with the same cultural background. It is also an area where variations in meaning can be the greatest. The following table identifies factors for consideration regarding one's own and another. Individuals' nonverbal messages, which may also compromise safety.
All right, then it goes into this next chart here. You're going to highlight the elements, which are gestures and facial expressions. So many common gestures could be offensive to individuals from other cultural backgrounds. So some American gestures mean very different things in other cultures. All right, signaling a person to come here using a hand signal with the back of the hand up can be insulting to some Asian and Latin Americans. So the way they summon people is differently or signal people to come. All right. So under facial expressions may have very different meanings depending on the cultural background of the individual. In some cultures, individuals respond to a loss of face or shame by smiling. Just be aware of that. Oh, you're also going to highlight the last two elements, which are on the next page, body positioning and eye contact. So body positioning, the amount of space or comfort zone between individuals can vary depending on acceptable practices of different cultural groups. Security personnel should be aware of their body language. Individuals from Middle Eastern culture may attempt to move closer when speaking with security personnel. Crossing your arms or looking at your watch could imply you don't care. And eye contact. It may be disrespectful in some cultures to maintain direct eye contact with an authority figure. In certain Asian cultures, children are taught to look down when being spoken to by an adult. All right, and it continues.
Note, although the examples given in the above table all pertain to cultural groupings, based on ethnicity, security personnel should be aware that nonverbal communication can vary based on numerous other factors like religion, gender, developmental, disabilities such as autism, etc. General guidelines. Security personnel must recognize one of the most reliable strategies for successful contacts with individuals from different cultural, racial, or ethnic backgrounds is to treat all individuals and groups with dignity and respect. Effective contacts with members of differing cultural groups cannot be reduced to a recipe style approach. Security guards should remain ethical and apply professional behaviors consistently with all members of the community. Generalizations can be proven erroneous and therefore counterproductive. Real life scenarios. The impact of implicit unconscious bias regarding gender, age, ethnicity, etc. Example, a few teenage boys are at a shopping mall and seem to be causing a disturbance, making loud remarks and running in the mall. A security officer believes he saw one of the boys place an item in his pocket without paying and has been agitated by the boys and their disturbance, and thus takes the boy away from his group for questioning and finds that he did not take anything. The boy's mother found out about the incident when he returned home and wants to take legal action against the security company. The security guard must be aware of any implicit bias that may impact the security guard or their company.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I'm going to move ahead here. And then we're going to reconvene on page 72. I'm going to share with you again. Here it is. Section 8, skills including de-escalation techniques to interact with people with disabilities or behavioral health issues. The first sentence of this section we're going to highlight where it says the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, was enacted to ensure people with disabilities are provided equal opportunity and access to services. Highlight that or underline it. Then it continues.
Learning the behavior signs and indicators of various special conditions can assist security personnel in identifying the proper intervention to bring the situation to a quick and safe conclusion. Although it is not the role of or within the capability of security personnel to attempt to diagnose a person's disability or medical condition, security personnel need to recognize cues and other indicators to make appropriate decisions regarding intervention strategies. In order to reduce stigma, security personnel should avoid prejudging the contact and remain aware of an underlying disability. It is the responsibility of all security personnel to Treat everyone with respect and integrity, no matter what their disability, race, creed, gender identity, or religion. To the extent possible, security personnel should observe the behavior exhibited by the person in an effort to determine what is happening and what might be prompting the observed behavior. A disability is a functional limitation. People with disabilities are capable of committing crimes. They are not relieved from their obligation to obey the law. Although the individual may have a disability, that individual may still be capable of injuring security personnel or the public.
All right. And then it continues under strategies for identifying and effectively communicating and de-escalating a situation with an individual with a disability or behavioral health issues. And it continues.
Disability means a mental or physical disability and has the meaning set forth in Sections 12,926 and 12,926.1 of the Government Code. Additionally, a mental disability can be any condition of the mind that has a long-term effect on a person's normal day-to-day activity. Intellectual developmental disabilities originate before adulthood and continue throughout the person's lifetime. This is not the same as mental illness. Some examples include, but are not limited to, autism spectrum disorder, cerebral palsy, attention, deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, Tourette syndrome, and Down syndrome. A person's ability to communicate, comprehend, move about, and generally interact within the community depends on the nature and severity of the disability. Depending on that, individual specific abilities and needs, standard procedures may have to be adjusted. When security personnel interact with people with developmental disabilities, the behavior of a person with a developmental disability can be misinterpreted by the reporting party and by responding individuals. If possible, security personnel should take time to observe the behaviors exhibited by the person in an effort to determine possible reasons for the person's behavior.
All right, next page.
Example, a person with cerebral palsy may have slow and or slurred speech, move with jerky motions, or have an erratic gait. At first observation might be falsely assume that the person is under the influence of alcohol or drugs.
All right, now this chart, we're going to highlight this whole chart where it says process, initial contact, guidelines. Approach in a calm and respectful manner. Be patient. Use simple language and ask short, open-ended questions. Speak slowly and clearly in a normal tone of voice. Do not exaggerate inflections or speak louder than normal. Proceed slowly. Allow the individual to set the pace. Give praise and encouragement. Note, security personnel should keep in mind that the person may be extremely fearful and may appear to be uncooperative. Then instructions or commands. Give specific instructions. Verify the individual understands by repeating back information. Refrain from giving more than one command at a time. Evaluation. Recognize cues that could identify possible causes for a behavior. Is the person exhibiting behaviors characteristic of a physical or developmental disability? Is the person exhibiting behaviors characteristic of a mental illness? Is the person under the apparent influence of alcohol or drugs? If under the apparent influence of drugs, is it a result of illegal abuse or a reaction to prescribed medications? Assessment. Do not automatically assume or dismiss criminal activity and safety concerns based on the individual's behavior. Look for subtle behavioral cues of impairments, for example, slow thought process, difficulty speaking, confusion, not responding to questions, etc. Questioning. Allow plenty of time for the individual to respond. If the individual does not understand, rephrase the questions, use simpler terms. Ask for simple and clear descriptions, for example, colors, clothing, etc. Ask open-ended questions. Avoid questions regarding time or complex sequences. Avoid questions that deal with abstract ideas. For example, why do you think he did that? Avoid questions that tell the person the answer that is expected. For instance, you saw him take the purse, didn't you? All right. Note, security personnel should be aware that the individual may attempt to answer questions in a, we're going to highlight this whole thing if we can. All right, let's try that. Highlight that. Wait, did that work? All right. If you can highlight this as well, note security personnel should be aware that the individual may attempt to answer questions in a way that would please the questioner rather than communicate factual information. Information gathering, gather additional information regarding the person's condition from bystanders who may have observed the person's behavior over a span of time, family members or acquaintances, other forms of information that a person may carry, for example, special ID cards in wallets, etc. And then it continues.
Physical disabilities and strategies. In order to make appropriate decisions and serve those with physical disabilities, security, personnel must be able to recognize indicators of people with physical disabilities. Limitations can include, but not be limited to, deaf or hard of hearing, visual impairment, neurologically based disorders, dementia, brain or spinal cord injury, etc., or other physical impairments, amputation, injury, etc. The success of contact with a person who is affected by a disability is often determined by the security personnel's conduct during the first moments of an encounter. Gather additional information regarding the person's condition from bystanders who may have observed the person's behavior over a span of time, family members or acquaintances, medical alert bracelets or necklaces, other forms of medical alert information that person may carry, mobility equipment and devices. When making any contact with a person using a mobility aid, security personnel must always be aware of their personal safety and the safety of others. It is important to remember that even though the person may be disabled, that person may be capable of injuring others.
All right. And then it continues.
Security personnel should consider any piece of mobility equipment as an extension of the person. Such devices should be searched at the same time the person is being searched. These devices may be used to conceal smuggled contraband and weapons. Security personnel should also consider devices that can extend the reach of the individual and take these devices into consideration when establishing a safety zone, canes, crutches, etc. People with physical disabilities may use several types of aids for mobility. These aids can include canes, crutches, walkers, braces, prostheses, motorized scooters, manual or motorized wheelchairs, service dogs, and personal attendants. People with severe spinal cord injuries may also use mobile respiratory devices or other equipment necessary for
All right. Next page.
bodily support. Blindness are visual impairments and strategies. Visual impairments include all conditions limiting sight. Approximately 80% of all individuals who are legally blind have some usable vision. Legally blind is defined as visual acuity of 20/200 or less in the better seeing eye with best conventional correction, or having a visual field, the total area an individual can see without moving the eyes from side to side of 20 degrees or less, also called tunnel vision in the better seeing eye. The degree to which a person's mobility is affected depends on that person's visual impairment. There are several guidelines for officers when interacting with a person who is visually impaired. These include, but are not limited to, the following.
All right. And then here's the chart: actions, communication, additional information. Talk directly to the person, not through an intermediary. Speak clearly in a normal voice and volume. Give detailed descriptions. Attempt to describe visual scenes vividly. Advise the person first before leaving the room or area. End any conversation in such a manner that the person knows the other person is leaving. Assessment. Do not immediately assume criminal activity based on an individual's behavior. Look for assistance devices, e.g., cane, hearing aid, service dog, etc. Obvious behavioral cues of impairments, e.g., tremors, hand signals, difficulty speaking, unsteady gait, etc. Subtle behavioral cues of impairments, e.g., slow thought process, confusion, not responding to questions, etc. Then it continues.
Service animals provide assistance with routine tasks. By law, a service animal must be allowed to accompany the individual anywhere the individual goes, with the exception of some animal parks and zoos. Some service animals are protective of their owners. Security guards should convey any actions to the animal's owner first, so the owner can caution or calm the animal if necessary. Care should be taken not to separate the animal from its owner. deaf or hard of hearing and strategies. The term deaf or hard of hearing means a substantial or complete loss of hearing. The ability to rapidly identify and properly treat people who are deaf or hard of hearing will enhance guards' abilities to accomplish their duties in a professional manner.
All right. Then it continues on the next page.
People who are deaf or hard of hearing often are concerned or even fearful about contact with uniformed officials. They may be concerned that they will be misunderstood by and perhaps be arrested or shot for not responding to commands. Mistaken for being under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Perceived as uncooperative or disrespectful. Appear to be anxious or confused because of an inability to communicate.
All right. And then the next paragraph, we're going to highlight the whole next paragraph where it says security personnel must be aware of the fact that if a person does not answer a question or obey a command or instruction, they may not be refusing to cooperate. If the person is deaf or hard of hearing, they may not hear the guard or even be aware of the guard's presence. Highlight that whole paragraph. And then it continues.
People who are deaf or hard of hearing may use a number of different means of communicating. Some may use speech while others use a combination of speech and sign language. Some deaf or hard of hearing people may have learned to speak through unconventional methods. Their speech may sound unclear or unintelligible at first. Security personnel should not confuse their speech as a symptom of intoxication. The most commonly used form of communicating with a person who is deaf or hard of hearing is through writing. The following list suggests a number of ways security guards can use this method to their advantage. Offer the person paper and pencil rather than waiting for the person to retrieve their own. This shows that the guard understands and also precludes the person from reaching into unseen areas. Use simple and concise language and brief sentences to inform the person of the reason for being stopped, questioned, detained, or arrested. Be patient and allow for adequate time for the person to respond and ask questions in writing. Recognize that the individual's statements may not be written in a standard grammatical format. Security personnel should not automatically assume that a person who is deaf or hard of hearing can read lips. Even a skilled lip reader may understand a minimal amount of spoken language. When communicating with a person who is skilled in reading lips, officers should look directly at the person when speaking. Speak slowly and clearly. Speak in a normal tone and volume. Note, shouting, exaggerating, or overemphasizing words will distort a person's lips and make lip reading more difficult. Security personnel may be able to recognize a person as deaf or hard of hearing by noticing the person is wearing one or more hearing aids. Even if the person is wearing a hearing aid, that person may still have difficulty understanding spoken words. Security personnel should speak slowly and distinctly and face the person when speaking. The following table identifies additional recommendations that security personnel can use when communicating with a person who is deaf or hard of hearing.
All right, recommendations. Get the person's attention, additional information, gain the person's attention before speaking. Since a deaf person or hard of hearing person may not hear calls for attention, tap the person lightly on the shoulder or use other signals to gain the person's attention. Making eye contact. Maintaining eye contact conveys that the individual's attention is on the person and enhances the feeling of direct communication. Use nonverbal methods. All conventional means to face-to-face communication involve nonverbal cues and messages. Additional use of body language, facial expressions, and gestures can aid other means of communicating. Use clear and concise words. Keep sentences short. If the individual does not understand, rephrase the thought rather than repeating the same words. And then it continues.
People who are deaf or hard of hearing may be no less dangerous than other individuals to the safety of guards or others. Security personnel should not jeopardize their safety or the safety of others by adopting an overly sympathetic attitude. Behavioral mental health considerations. Security personnel routinely encounter persons with mental illness in a variety of settings. How security guards respond to persons living with a mental disorder can have Tremendous impact on how these encounters will be resolved. The basic philosophy of any security personnel should be to respond in a manner that is humane, compassionate, and supportive. Mental illnesses are a medical condition that affects a person's thinking, feeling, mood, ability to relate to others, and disrupts daily functioning. Mental illness is defined as any mental health disorder as identified in the most recent edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders as a syndrome characterized by clinically significant disturbance in an individual's cognition, emotion regulation, or behavior that reflects a dysfunction in the psychological, biological, or development processes underlying mental functioning. Persons managing a mental illness can have a substantially diminished capacity for coping with the ordinary demands of life. The causes and impacts of mental illness vary and are not bound by race, gender, or socioeconomic status.
All right, continues on the next page.
Recognizing behaviors associated with behavioral issue mental illness. Security personnel should not attempt to diagnose mental illness. Security personnel must be able to recognize general indicators of mental illness so that appropriate actions can be taken. Indicators to consider when determining whether a behavior is related to mental illness include, but are not limited to, irrational fear, extreme fright over something that a reasonable person would consider of little or no threat. Extreme expression of emotion out of context for the situation. Reckless behavior, walking on the freeway. Acting out with inappropriate or aggressive behavior. A reduced capacity to take care of basic needs, e.g., stops bathing or eating. Sleeps very little or more than normal, failure to find adequate shelter, etc. Inability to make logical thought connections or to concentrate. Rapid flow of unrelated thoughts. Strange and erratic behaviors. Speech that is unclear or does not communicate an idea, talking in rhymes. Repetition of words or phrases, speech that is rapid or nonstop. Failure to or slow to respond to simple questions or commands, blank stare. Memory loss related to common facts, with name, awareness of time, identity of. Others. Experiencing hallucinations, a false perception experienced through any of the five senses, hearing voices, feeling one's skin crawl, smelling strange. Odors, seeing visions, etc. When hallucinating, individuals may be so overwhelmed that they have little or no awareness of their surroundings. Experiencing delusions, a persistent false belief or thoughts and actions that are not based on reality, e.g., delusions of grandeur, self-importance, being persecuted or conspired against, etc.
All right, and it continues.
Note, security personnel may come into contact with people affected by schizophrenia because certain medications taken by individuals who are affected by schizophrenia may cause agitation that can lead to a buildup of tension, anxiety, or panic. This may lead to potentially dangerous situations. When frightened, a person with this disorder may act out with even more bizarre or paranoid behavior. Note, security personnel should be aware that substance abuse, drugs, and/or alcohol can also cause delusions, hallucinations, and violent mood swings in an individual. Likewise, mentally disabled persons may use drugs or alcohol to mitigate their symptoms. Security personnel must make difficult judgments and decisions about the behaviors and intent of any individual they think may be affected by a mental illness. This requires special considerations to avoid unnecessary violence or civil liability.
All right, next page.
People affected by mental illness can be unpredictable and sometimes violent. Security personnel should never compromise or jeopardize their own safety or the safety of others when dealing with individuals who display symptoms of a mental illness. Not all people with mental illness are dangerous, while some may represent danger only under certain circumstances or conditions. Some may be capable of going very quickly from a state of calm to being extremely agitated. Real-life scenarios. Interacting with a person with a suspected disability or mental illness. Example, a homeless individual with a suspected mental illness has been roaming around an area a security guard is tasked with monitoring. The security guard takes all Precautions to de-escalate and mitigate client property damage, maintain client employee. Safety and warns local law enforcement for any trespass issues the security guard may have with the individual.
All right. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing again quickly. And then I'm going to skip ahead here. We're going to reconvene hang on one second. I'm going to share this again. And we are back on page 81, section 9, use of force scenario training, factors that can affect an individual's response when threatened with danger. And it says,
Self-control is maintaining composure to make sound judgments and decisions. Self-control is one of the security personnel's greatest assets in dealing with a person or a situation. Self-control reflects one's confidence in their skills and abilities, which can be improved through training, practice, and experience, thereby enhancing decision-making and reaction time. Professional demeanor can have a positive influence on calming a subject, making it easier to take the safely utilized use of force. Non-professional demeanor. An offensive language can easily lead to increased conflict, encouraging dangerous behavior by the subject and resulting in poor behavior on the part of the security personnel.
all right, now the next section we're going to highlight where it says two major emotional factors that security personnel need to focus on to maintain self-control are fear, an emotional response to a perceived threat, and anger, a feeling of displeasure from perceived opposition. You're going to highlight those two. All right. And then it's going to continue.
It is important to understand fear and anger, since both can affect security persons. Reactions during a dangerous situation. Uncontrolled fear and anger tend to decrease the security personnel's ability to make sound judgments and decisions. Uncontrolled fear and anger tend to increase hesitation, verbal abuse, and unreasonable force. Fear alone does not justify the use of force or deadly force. An imminent harm is not merely a fear of future harm, no matter how great the fear and no matter how great the likelihood of the harm, but is one that from appearances must be instantly confronted and addressed. The decision of whether or not to use force or deadly force may be influenced by, but not limited to, the security personnel's training and experience, judgment, mental alertness, existing facts and circumstances, understanding of state law, case law, and agency policy. The use of force by security personnel is not one of hostility, but rather one designed to defend and protect persons and property from an escalation of violence. Proper training and practice are keys to dealing effectively with dangerous situations. They help develop confidence, promote a trained response, and enhance mental alertness and concentration, as well as develop emotional control.
All right. Then it continues on the next page.
Factors to consider before using force. Whenever possible, security personnel should attempt to obtain voluntary compliance without resorting to physical force. Some communication techniques and skills for obtaining voluntary compliance that can be utilized are ask, set context, present options, and act. The tenets of procedural justice, including voice, neutrality, respect, and trustworthiness, add to effective communication, may lead to greater police legitimacy, and may de-escalate a situation. There are a number of factors that can affect which force option is selected. The following chart identifies, but is not limited to, some of the most critical factors.
All right, factor public and security personnel safety considerations, immediate action required for self-defense of or defense of others, presence of a weapon and type of weapon, other weapons, firearms, characteristics of subject as compared to the characteristics of the officer. Now you're gonna highlight this whole table right here. And then it goes size, age, knowledge of capabilities, history. So those are characteristics of the subject. Availability of assistance, additional security personnel, distance and additional security personnel, nature and condition of the location and surroundings, to bystanders, availability of weapons, environmental considerations. You're going to highlight that whole table. You should understand that. All right, and then it continues on.
Security personnel must consider the totality of the circumstances when selecting a force option. It is not the intent of this chart to imply that an officer's force options are limited based on any single factor. A key principle in maintaining public trust and respect is ensuring that any use of force is reasonable. Security personnel must be aware of and comply with their specific agency policies regarding appropriate force options. Real life scenario. Example, a security officer is working at the front door of a jewelry store when he sees an individual walking back and forth staring at the storage with his hands in his pockets. The security officer sees the man pull out what looks to be a black item from his pocket but cannot get a confirmed visual. The officer remains calm and stays alert until he can get a confirmation of a deadly weapon in the man's pocket. The security officer considers all factors before making determination as the man attempts to remove the item out of his pocket while walking towards the jewelry store. The officer is aware of their surroundings and notices the man gravitate towards the pawn shop next door. The man pulls a black, vintage cellular phone from his pocket on proceeds to walk into the pawn shop. No use. A force or deadly force is necessary.
All right, then I'm gonna skip ahead again. And then we will reconvene on page 84, section 10, mental health and policing of the public, categories of mental health. The first paragraph says how security personnel respond to persons living with a mental disorder can have tremendous impact on how these encounters will be resolved. Now we're going to highlight the last sentence of that first paragraph where it says the basic philosophy of any security officer should be to respond in a manner that is humane, compassionate, and supportive. Highlight that. And it continues.
Mental illness is defined as any mental health disorder, as identified in the most recent edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders as a syndrome, characterized by clinically significant disturbance in an individual's cognition, emotion, regulation, or behavior that reflects a dysfunction in the psychological, biological, or development processes underlying mental functioning. Mental illnesses are a medical condition that affect a person's thinking, feeling, mood, ability to relate to others, and disrupts daily functioning. Persons managing a mental illness can have a substantially diminished capacity for coping with the ordinary demands of life. Mental illnesses can affect people of any age, race, religion, income, or background.
All right, then it says we're going to highlight this whole table again where it says type of mental illness, mental disorder. Mental disorder is not defined by law, and officers are not required to make a medical diagnosis of a mental disorder. A mental disorder is primarily a brain disorder, creates problems with feeling, thinking, and perception, affects a person's behavior by causing bizarre and/or inappropriate behavior, can be short-term, acute, or long-term chronic, can occur at any time during a person's life. Thought disorder. Thought disorder is a condition where the person's thought process is disrupted, causing the person to experience delusions, hallucinations, and/or irrational fears, or they may exhibit unusual behaviors. Mood disorder. Mood disorder, also referred to as an affective disorder, is a condition where the person experiences periodic disturbances in mood, concentration, sleep, activity, appetite, or social behavior. Mood disorders can be marked by periods of extreme sadness, depression, or excitement, mania. Mood disorders tend to be episodic. Between episodes, the individual may have no remarkable symptoms or difficulties. Most common disorder, clinical depression. All right, and then it continues. Next page.
Specific types of mental illness include bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and personality disorder, biases and stigmas surrounding mental illness. Security personnel must be trained in how to recognize people with mental health issues and deal with them in a safe and humane manner. Many agencies already provide some form of crisis intervention training as a key element of de-escalation, but crisis intervention policies and training must be merged with a new focus on tactics officers can use to de-escalate situations. Security personnel should not attempt to diagnose mental illness. A mental illness is often difficult for even the trained professional to define in a given individual. Security personnel must be able to recognize general indicators of mental illness so that appropriate actions can be taken. Not all people with mental illness are dangerous, while some may represent danger only. Under certain circumstances or conditions, some may be capable of going very quickly, from a state of calm to being extremely agitated.
All right. And then last paragraph here.
Real life scenario. Example, a security guard was performing a routine walk around a laundromat when the guard saw a man with a knife. The guard recognized that the man was experiencing a mental health crisis, possibly exacerbated by the consumption of drugs. The guard called. The proper authorities who came and talked to the man calmed him down and took him into custody without jeopardizing their safety, his safety, or that of the public.
All right. And then stop sharing again. And I'll skip ahead again. And we will come back here. Sharing again on page 87.
Section 11, active shooter situations. Recognizing an active shooter situation. An active shooter is an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined and populated area. In most cases, active shooters use firearms, and in some cases, there is no pattern or method to their selection of victims. Active shooter situations are unpredictable and evolve quickly. Typically, the immediate deployment of law enforcement is required to stop the shooting and mitigate harm to victims. Because active shooter situations are often over within 10 to 15 minutes before law enforcement arrives on the scene, individuals must be prepared both mentally and physically to deal with an active shooter situation. Roles and responsibilities of security personnel. Law enforcement, fire, emergency response personnel, and other first responders have detailed plans for responding to and recovering from such incidents. Businesses can blend into this response and aid in recovery by having resources available such as building plans, location of employees, utility access, and control over cameras, locks, and alarms. When an active shooter incident occurs, civilians will look to authority figures for guidance. They will not make a distinction between law enforcement officers or other uniformed personnel who are employees. All employees should receive basic training in civilian techniques for responding to active shooter events using the run, hide, fight model. When applicable, employees should know how to lead or direct the public to the nearest evacuation routes, run and identified secure areas, hide, barricade. Quickly determine the most reasonable way to protect your own life. Remember, that members of the public are likely to follow the lead of a uniformed guard during an active shooter situation, but you are not responsible for ensuring their compliance.
All right. Next section, we're going to highlight the heading, run, hide, fight. You're going to highlight all of these headings. So number one, if there's access, one, run. If there is an accessible escape path, attempt to evacuate the premises. Highlight that. Highlight number two, hide. If evacuation is not possible, find a place to hide where the active shooter is less likely to find you. And three, fight as a last resort, and only when your life is in imminent danger, attempt to disrupt and or incapacitate the active shooter. Bye. All right. So then it says this under run.
Be sure to have an escape route and plan in mind. Evacuate regardless of whether others agree to follow. Leave your belongings behind. Help others escape if possible. Prevent individuals from entering an area where the active shooter may be. Keep your hands visible. Follow the instructions of any police officers. Do not attempt to move wounded people. Call 911 when you are safe.
All right. And then under hide has the following.
Your hiding place should be out of the active shooter's view. Provide protection if shots are fired in your direction, i.e., a room with a closed and locked door. Oh, not trap you or restrict your options for movement. To prevent an active shooter from entering your hiding place. Oh, lock the door. Oh, blockade the door with heavy furniture. If the active shooter is nearby. Oh, lock the door. Oh, silence your cell phone and or other personal devices. Oh, turn off any source of noise, i.e. radios, televisions. Oh, hide behind large items, i.e. cabinets, desks. Oh, remain quiet. If evacuation and hiding out are not possible. Oh, remain calm. Oh, dial 911 if possible to alert police to the active shooter's location. Oh, if you cannot speak, leave the line open and allow the dispatcher to listen.
All right, then under fight has the following. Acting as an aggressively as possible against, so it says as a last resort and only when your life is in imminent danger, attempt to disrupt and or incapacitate the active shooter by acting as aggressively as possible against them, throwing items and improvising weapons, yelling, committing to your actions. And then how to respond when law enforcement arrives.
How to respond when law enforcement arrives. Law enforcement's purpose is to stop the active shooter as soon as possible. Officers will proceed directly to the area in which the last shots were heard. Though officers usually arrive in teams of four. Four, however, initially it could be alone. Officer. Oh, officers may wear regular patrol uniforms or external bulletproof vests, Kevlar, helmets, and other tactical equipment. Oh, officers may be armed with rifles, shotguns, handguns. Oh, officers may use pepper spray or tear gas to control the situation. Oh, officers may shout commands and may push individuals to the ground for their safety.
And it continues on the next page.
How to react when law enforcement arrives. Oh, remain calm and follow officers' instructions. Put down any items in your hands, i.e., bags, jackets. Oh, immediately raise hands and spread fingers. Oh, keep hands visible at all times. Oh, avoid making quick movements toward officers, such as holding onto them for safety. Oh, avoid pointing, screaming, and or yelling. Oh, do not stop to ask officers for help or direction when evacuating. Just proceed in. The direction from which officers are entering the premises. Information to provide to law enforcement or 911 operator. Oh, location of the active shooter. A number of shooters if more than one. A physical description of shooters. A number and type of weapons held by the shooters. A number of potential victims at the location. The first officers to arrive at the scene will not stop to help injured persons. Expect rescue. Teams comprised of additional officers and emergency medical personnel to follow the initial officers. These rescue teams will treat and remove any injured persons. They may also call upon able-bodied individuals to assist in removing the wounded from the premises.
And it continues.
Once you have reached a safe location or an assembly point, you will likely be held in that area by law enforcement until the situation is under control and all witnesses have been identified and questioned. Do not leave until law enforcement authorities have instructed you to do so. Real life scenario. Example, a security officer is trained so that if they see something, they say something and report it immediately to law enforcement. If the security officer is armed, the officer should make an attempt to neutralize the active shooter if possible.
All right, then I'm gonna stop sharing and skip ahead here. Oh, well, all right. I've stopped sharing, and that was the end of the book. So this is concludes the video portion of this class, which is the appropriate use of force 2-hour refresher. I'm going to end the recording here, and I will see you on the other side.